The Kara station floated in the empty space between three great star empires. It was a massive place, bigger than most cities, where ships from 100 different worlds came to get fixed, to refuel, and to trade goods. Thousands of workers lived and worked on the station. Mechanics, traders, soldiers, diplomats, and travelers of every species passed through its long metal hallways every single day. In Repair Bay 7. A human man worked alone. His name was Daniel Cole. He was in his late 40s, with hands rough from years of hard work. His dark hair had streaks of gray in it now, and his eyes carried a heaviness that made people uncomfortable when they looked at him for too long. He had arrived at the station 3 years ago with nothing but a bag of tools and a willingness to work hard. He never talked about where he came from. He never talked about his past. He just showed up, did his job, and went back to his small room at the end of each day. The other mechanics called him Ghost. They called him this because he almost never spoke. He arrived at work before anyone else and left after everyone had gone home. He ate his meals alone. He sat alone during breaks. When other workers tried to start conversations with him, he would give short answers and then return to whatever ship he was fixing. But nobody could deny that Daniel Cole was the best mechanic on the entire station. Ships that other workers said were beyond saving would come into Bay 7 broken and dying. They would leave running better than the day they were first built. Daniel had a gift for understanding machines. He could listen to an engine and know exactly what was wrong with it. He could look at a broken system and see the solution that others missed. The station administrator was a tall alien named Thress. He belonged to a species called the Valorians, who had 4 arms and skin the color of pale copper. Thress had tried many times to promote Daniel to a leadership position. He wanted to make Daniel the supervisor of all the repair bays. Each time, Daniel simply shook his head and walked away. He did not want to lead anyone. He did not want attention. He just wanted to fix ships. Thresses would tell curious newcomers about the strange human mechanic. He would say that Daniel fixed ships, and that was all he did. That was all he wanted to do. Most people accepted this explanation and left Daniel alone. What nobody knew was that Daniel carried something in his chest pocket. It was a small piece of metal, old and scratched from years of being held. The insignia showed a silver eagle holding an anchor, surrounded by small stars. It was the symbol of the United Earth Naval Command, 7th Fleet, a fleet that had been destroyed 15 years ago in a battle that changed the course of galactic history. Daniel touched that insignia many times each day. He would reach into his pocket and press his fingers against the cold metal. Sometimes his lips would move silently, like he was speaking to someone who was not there. Then he would take a deep breath, push the memories down, and return to his work. On this particular morning, Daniel was lying on his back underneath a trading ship from the Kesari homeworld. The ship had problems with its plasma conduits. The metal tubes that carried energy through the vessel had become corroded and weak. Daniel was carefully removing the old conduits and preparing to install new ones. The work was slow and detailed. It required patience and steady hands. Daniel had both. He found peace in this kind of work. When he was focused on fixing something, he did not have to think about the past. He did not have to remember the faces of the dead. He did not have to hear the screams that still echoed in his nightmares. A chime sounded through the station. It was the alert system, announcing an important arrival. Daniel paused in his work and listened. A diplomatic convoy was coming to the station. Representatives from the Althrani Concordat were arriving for peace negotiations with the Terran coalition. This was big news. The Althrani and humanity had been at war 15 years ago. That war had ended, but the relationship between the two species was still fragile. These negotiations were meant to strengthen the peace and build new agreements for trade and cooperation. Daniel's hands stopped moving. The Althrani. He had not heard that name spoken in a very long time. His chest felt tight. His heart beat faster. Without thinking, his hand moved to his pocket and pressed against the insignia, the Althrani Concordat. The species that had sent 47 warships against 5 human vessels at the Battle of Vareth Corridor. The species whose weapons had killed his mother and 8,000 of her crew. Daniel closed his eyes. He could see it all again. The darkness of space lit up by explosions. The screaming of alarms. The shaking of the deck beneath his feet as the ship took hit after hit. His mother's voice, calm and steady, even as everything fell apart around them. He forced the memories away. He pushed them down into the dark place inside himself, where he kept all the things he could not bear to feel. Then he opened his eyes and looked at the plasma conduits above him. The Althrani were here for peace. The war was over. It had been over for 15 years. What happened at Vareth Corridor was history now. It was written in books and taught in schools. Young people who had not even been born yet learned about it as just another chapter in the long story of galactic conflict. But for Daniel, it was not history. It was still happening. Every night when he closed his eyes, he was back on the bridge of the Resolute, watching his mother give the order that would kill her and save everyone else. He took a deep breath. Then another. Slowly his heartbeat returned to normal. His hands stopped shaking. He was just a mechanic now. He was nobody special. He fixed ships and kept to himself and tried not to remember. That was his life, and he intended to keep it that way. Daniel picked up his tools and returned to work. Above him, through the transparent sections of the station's hull, he could see 3 elegant ships approaching. They were Althrani vessels, grown rather than built, their hulls smooth and organic like the shells of sea creatures. They moved with a grace that made the boxy human ships around them look clumsy and primitive. Daniel watched them for a moment. Then he looked away and focused on the plasma conduits. The past was the past. He would not let it touch him. He would stay silent, stay hidden, and stay safe in his little corner of the station. Or so he believed. The Althrani diplomatic convoy docked at the station with smooth precision. The 3 organic ships settled into their assigned bays like living creatures coming to rest. Their hulls pulsed with soft light, and the air around them seemed to hum with strange energy. Ambassador Velisorian was the first to step off the lead vessel. She was tall, even by the standards of her own species. Her skin was a deep luminescent blue that seemed to glow from within. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with the wisdom of someone who had lived for many centuries. The Althrani lived much longer than humans. Velith had seen more history unfold than most species had ever recorded. Her entourage followed behind her. Aides, guards, and advisors formed a protective group around the ambassador as she walked through the station. Everyone stopped to stare. The Althrani were beautiful in a way that was almost unsettling. They moved like dancers, every step graceful and deliberate. Velith noticed the usual sights as she walked. Merchants trying to sell their goods. Diplomats exchanging polite greetings. Station security officers watching everything with careful eyes. It was all normal and expected. But then something caught her attention. Through a window, she could see into one of the repair bays. A human man was working alone on a ship. His movements were different from the other mechanics she had seen. They were precise and controlled, carrying the discipline of military training. She had seen movements like that before, many years ago, on battlefields that still haunted her memories. She stopped walking and watched him. Her aide noticed and moved closer. He was a young Althrani named Keth, eager to please and quick to worry. He asked if something was wrong. Velith shook her head slowly. She said there was something familiar about that human, something she could not quite place. Keth looked through the window and shrugged. He said the human was just a mechanic. The station employed many of them. Velith agreed, but she did not move. She continued watching as Daniel finished his work and climbed out from under the ship. He wiped his hands on a cloth. Then he reached into his chest pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. Velith's breath caught in her throat. She watched as Daniel held the object in his palm. His eyes closed. His lips moved silently. Then he tucked it away again and returned to his work. A cold feeling spread through Velith's chest. She recognized what she had seen. Not the man himself, but what he represented. That gesture, that silent moment of remembrance, was the behavior of a soldier carrying the weight of fallen comrades. She told Kath to continue to the diplomatic quarters. She said she would join them shortly. Kath protested, mentioning security concerns, but Velith waved him away. She needed to think. She needed to remember. That night, in her elegant guest chambers, Velith could not sleep. She stood at the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between worlds, was the Varith corridor, the place where everything had changed. 15 years ago, she had been Admiral Velith Saurian, commander of the Third Armada. The war between the Althrani and humanity had been raging for 2 years. Both sides had suffered terrible losses. Both sides were desperate for victory. Intelligence reports told Velith that a small human fleet was guarding a critical supply line in the Varith corridor. Only 5 ships. An easy target. If she destroyed them, she could cut off supplies to an entire sector of human space. The war could end in months instead of years. She gathered her armada. 47 warships. The largest force she had ever commanded. They jumped through folded space and emerged at the Varith corridor, ready for a quick and decisive victory. What she found instead was horror. The 5 human ships did not run. They did not surrender. They fought. Led by a vessel called the Resolute and commanded by Admiral Patricia Cole, they held the line against impossible odds. For 11 hours, those 5 ships battled the entire Third Armada. Velith had never seen anything like it. The humans should have been destroyed in the first hour. Instead, they kept fighting. They used every trick, every tactic, every desperate measure to stay alive. And all the while, behind them, civilian transport ships were evacuating through the corridor. Among those civilian ships was an Althrani refugee vessel. It had gotten caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The human fleet protected it along with their own people. In the end, the Resolute was crippled and dying. Its weapons were destroyed. Its engines were failing. But Admiral Cole did not surrender. She ordered her ship to ram Velith's command vessel at full speed. Velith barely escaped with her life. Her flagship was destroyed. 12 Althrani ships were lost that day. 8,000 of her people died, and every single human ship was destroyed. Over 8,000 humans died protecting civilians of both species. When the war ended 2 years later, the Battle of Varith Corridor became legendary. The Althrani called it an act of profound honor. They said that humanity had proven its worth as a species worthy of respect. The sacrifice of the Seventh Fleet became the foundation of the peace that followed. But Velith knew the truth that the history books did not capture. She knew the screams she heard on the communication channels. She knew the faces of the young officers who died following her orders. She knew the weight of all those deaths, human and Althrani alike. She had become a diplomat because she could no longer bear to be a soldier. Now, 15 years later, she had seen something that brought it all back. A human mechanic holding a small piece of metal. An insignia. The symbol of the Seventh Fleet. Velith remembered Admiral Patricia Cole. She remembered studying the human commander during the battle, trying to understand the woman who refused to run. Patricia Cole had a family, the report said. A husband who died early in the war. A son who served as an engineer on her flagship. a son who was one of only 17 survivors. Veleth's hands trembled. She pressed them against the cold glass of the window. Could it be possible? Could that quiet mechanic in Base 7 be the son of the woman who had nearly killed her? The son of the admiral who had sacrificed everything for her people and her duty? Veleth needed to know the truth. She needed to understand why he was here, hiding in silence, fixing ships while carrying the weight of the dead in his pocket. Tomorrow, she would find a way to speak with him. Tomorrow, she would learn his story, and perhaps, she thought, they could help each other find peace at last. Ambassador Veleth spent the next 2 days asking quiet questions. She did not want to draw attention to her interest in the mechanic. She simply gathered information piece by piece, like a puzzle slowly coming together. His name was Daniel Cole. He had arrived at Carr Station 3 years ago. He had no family listed in any records. His history before arriving at the station was completely blank, as if he had appeared out of nowhere. His work record was perfect. He had never caused any trouble. He kept to himself and did his job better than anyone else on the station. The other workers called him Ghost. They said he rarely spoke and never smiled. They said he worked longer hours than anyone else and never complained. They said he was strange but harmless. A ghost. Veleth, that was a fitting name for a man who was trying to disappear from his own past. On the 3rd day of negotiations, an opportunity presented itself. One of the Althrani escort vessels developed engine trouble. The crystalline matrix in its propulsion system had begun to crack and fail. The station administrator recommended Base 7 for the repair. Thres, the Valorian administrator, praised the human mechanic there. He said Daniel Cole was the best on the station. He said the human had repaired Althrani vessels before, and his work was always excellent. Veleth insisted on overseeing the repair personally. Her aides objected strongly. They said it was beneath her dignity. They said there were security concerns. But Veleth dismissed their worries with a wave of her hand. She needed to see for herself. She needed to know the truth. When she arrived at Base 7, Daniel was already working. He had identified the problem within minutes and was fabricating replacement parts for the damaged matrix. His hands moved with confidence and skill. He did not look up when she entered. He did not acknowledge her presence at all. Veleth stood and watched him work. An hour passed. Then another. She said nothing. She simply observed. She noticed the way he handled the delicate Althrani technology with respect and care. She noticed how he studied each component before touching it, making sure he understood its purpose. She noticed the small pauses when his hand would drift toward his chest pocket, as if seeking comfort from something hidden there. Finally, when Daniel emerged from beneath the ship to check a diagnostic screen, Veleth spoke. She said that he understood Althrani engineering very well. Daniel did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the screen. He said he had practice. Veleth moved closer. She said she imagined the war had provided many opportunities to study Althrani technology. She mentioned that the 7th Fleet had encountered Althrani vessels many times during the conflict. Daniel's hands stopped moving on the controls. His whole body went still. The silence stretched out between them like the empty space between stars. Slowly, carefully, Daniel turned to face her. His eyes met hers for the first time. There was pain in those eyes. Pain and anger and exhaustion. He said one word. He said she knew. Veleth shook her head gently. She said she suspected. She said she was there, at Vareth Corridor. She said she commanded the 3rd Armada. Daniel's face went pale. His jaw tightened. She could see the muscles in his neck straining as he fought to control himself. Veleth continued speaking, her voice soft and careful. She said she did not know a Cole had survived. She asked if his mother was Admiral Patricia Cole. She said she recognized the family resemblance when she saw him holding the insignia. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. He just stared at her with those haunted eyes. Then he spoke, and his voice was rough like gravel scraped across stone. He asked what she wanted. Vela said she wanted to understand. She wanted to understand why the son of the woman who destroyed her command ship now spent his days fixing vessels in silence. She wanted to understand what had happened to the engineer who kept the Resolute fighting for 3 hours past when it should have been destroyed. Daniel laughed. It was an ugly sound, without any real humor in it. He asked if she wanted to know why he did not become a hero, why he did not accept the medals and the promotions and the speeches about sacrifice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the insignia. He held it up so she could see it clearly. The silver eagle, the anchor, the stars, the symbol of everything he had lost. He said the insignia belonged to his mother. He said she gave it to him on the bridge of the Resolute in the final minutes before she died. She told him someone had to remember. Someone had to carry the fleet forward. His hand was shaking now. His voice cracked as he continued. He said he was the one who kept the engines running. Every shot they fired, every maneuver they made, every second they stayed alive was because of him. He was the chief engineer. He kept the power flowing. He kept the systems working. He gave them the ability to fight. And when his mother gave the order to ram the Althrani command ship, he was the one who overrode the safety systems. He pushed the reactor past its limits. He gave the Resolute its final burst of speed. He said he survived because his mother ordered him to the escape pod. She told him someone had to remember. Someone had to tell the truth of what happened. Daniel's eyes were wet now. Tears threatened to spill down his cheeks. He said he had been carrying the insignia ever since. He said he was tired. He was so tired of remembering. Vela stepped closer to him. Her luminescent eyes were soft with an emotion that went beyond words. She said she understood now. He was hiding here. He fixed ships because that was what he knew how to do. Because it was penance. Daniel shook his head slowly. He said it was all he had left. They stood there in the quiet of Base 7, 2 survivors of the same battle, 2 people carrying the same weight of the dead. The war had made them enemies. The years had made them both ghosts, haunting their own lives, unable to move forward. Velith reached out and gently touched Daniel's hand. The one holding the insignia. She said perhaps it was time for both of them to stop hiding. Perhaps it was time to find another way to honor the dead. Daniel looked at her. For the first time in 15 years, something other than pain flickered in his eyes. It might have been hope. The news spread through Korath Station like fire through dry grass. Within hours, everyone knew. The quiet mechanic in Base 7 was not just a simple worker. He was Lieutenant Commander Daniel Cole, survivor of the Battle of Vareth Corridor. He was the son of Admiral Patricia Cole, the legendary commander who had sacrificed her fleet to save thousands of civilians. He was the last person alive who carried the insignia of the 7th Fleet. Daniel did not know how the news got out. Perhaps someone had overheard his conversation with Velith. Perhaps station security had been monitoring the diplomatic areas. It did not matter. The secret he had kept for 3 years was now known to everyone. He tried to return to his normal routine. He woke up early, went to Base 7, and started working on the ships that needed repair. But everything was different now. The other mechanics looked at him with new eyes. Men and women who had worked beside him for years, who had barely spoken to him, now stared at him with something like awe. They whispered to each other when they thought he could not hear. They pointed at him when they thought he was not looking. Young human officers stationed at Korath sought him out. They came to Base 7 in small groups, nervous and excited. They asked him for stories about the battle. They asked him about his mother. They asked him what it was like to fight against impossible odds and survive. Daniel did not want to answer their questions. He did not want to be a legend. He just wanted to fix ships and be left alone. But the visitors kept coming. An elderly Valorian engineer told Daniel that he had once worked on supply ships during the war. He said the supplies Daniel's fleet had protected saved his entire colony from starvation. He wept as he shook Daniel's hand and thanked him for his mother's sacrifice. A group of young Althrani students approached Daniel with curious questions about human engineering. They had been taught about the battle in their history classes. They wanted to know how 5 ships could hold off 47 for so long. They treated him like a living museum exhibit. A reporter from a major news network tried to interview Daniel about his experiences. She offered him money. She offered him fame. She said his story could inspire billions of people across the galaxy. Daniel refused them all. He turned away the visitors. He ignored the stares. He rejected the interview requests. But he could not escape the weight of recognition. Everywhere he went on the station, people knew who he was. The invisibility he had worked so hard to build was completely gone. One evening, Thrust came to see Daniel in his small quarters. The Valorian administrator sat down across from him and spoke carefully. Tress said the station wanted to honor Daniel formally. They wanted to hold a ceremony. They wanted to give him medals and recognition for his service during the war. They wanted to rename Base 7 after his mother. Daniel shook his head firmly. He said he was still the same person he had always been. He fixed ships. That was all. Tress leaned forward. He said Daniel was more than that. He said Daniel was a symbol. He was living proof of human courage and sacrifice. He was a bridge between the past and the present. Daniel's voice rose in frustration. He said he did not want to be a symbol. He wanted to be left alone. He wanted everyone to forget about him and let him work in peace. Thress looked at him with sad understanding. He said that was not possible anymore. The truth was out. People would always know who Daniel was and what he represented. He could not go back to being invisible. After Thress left, Daniel sat alone in the darkness of his room. He held the insignia in his hands and stared at it. The familiar weight of it. The worn edges. The scratches from years of being clutched in moments of despair. He thought about running. He could leave the station, find another place to hide, start over again somewhere new. But he knew it would not work. His face was everywhere now. His name was in the news. There was nowhere left to hide. A soft chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. He almost did not answer. But something made him rise and open it. Ambassador Veleth stood in the hallway. She was alone, without her usual group of aides and guards. She asked if she could come in. Daniel stepped aside and let her enter. She looked around his small quarters, at the bare walls and simple furniture. There was nothing personal anywhere. No pictures. No decorations. Nothing that suggested a life beyond mere existence. Veleth said she understood how he felt. She said the attention was overwhelming. She said being recognized for something painful was sometimes worse than being forgotten. Daniel asked her why she came. Veleth reached into her garment and pulled out something small. It was a crystalline object that glowed with soft blue light. She called it a memory stone. She said it contained the final transmissions from her fleet at Vareth Corridor. Every order given, every farewell spoken, every scream and every prayer. She said she had listened to it once each year on the anniversary of the battle. She said it was her way of honoring the dead, her way of remembering what happened and why it mattered. She held the crystal out toward Daniel. She said she would like him to listen with her this year. She said she would like to hear the transmissions from the 7th Fleet, if any record survived. She said perhaps they could find some meaning together. Daniel stared at the glowing crystal. His throat felt tight. His eyes burned with tears he refused to shed. He asked why she would want that. Why would she want to relive the worst day of both their lives? Veleth's voice was gentle but firm. She said they were the last ones who truly remembered. Everyone else knew the battle from history books and documentaries. But the two of them had been there. They had seen the deaths. They had heard the screams. They carried the real truth of what happened. She said their people, human and Althrani alike, had carried this grief long enough. It was time to transform it into something else. Something that could heal instead of hurt. Daniel looked at the crystal in her hand. Then he looked at the insignia in his own. For 15 years, he had tried to forget. He had tried to hide from his past. He had tried to pretend he was nobody special. But Veleth was right. He could not run from who he was. The dead deserve better than a survivor who hid in shame. Slowly, Daniel reached out and took the memory stone from Veleth's hand. He said he would listen. He said he would share the recordings from the 7th Fleet. And for the first time in 15 years, he allowed himself to hope that healing might be possible. The ceremony took place in the station's Memorial Hall, a quiet chamber where travelers of all species came to honor their dead. The walls were lined with plaques and holographic displays, showing the names of those who had fallen in various conflicts across the galaxy. It was a place of peace and reflection, far from the noise and bustle of the main station. Only a small group attended. Daniel had insisted on that. He did not want crowds or cameras or politicians making speeches. This was not about spectacle. It was about truth. Ambassador Veleth stood on one side of the room with a handful of Althrani witnesses. Daniel stood on the other side with Thress and a few human officers who had served in the war. Between them, on a simple table, sat two objects: the glowing memory stone from the Althrani fleet, and a small data chip containing the recovered transmissions from the 7th Fleet. Daniel wore his old uniform for the first time in 15 years. He had kept it stored away, unable to throw it out but unwilling to look at it. Now it hung on his shoulders, slightly loose from the weight he had lost over the years. But it still fit. It still felt right. The insignia was pinned properly above his heart, where it belonged. Veleth spoke first. She explained what the memory stone contained. Then she activated it. The room filled with voices from the past. Althrani commanders giving orders. Officers reporting damage and casualties. Young soldiers speaking final words to loved ones they would never see again. The sounds of explosions and alarms and the desperate chaos of battle. Daniel listened with closed eyes. He had been on the other side of that battle. He had helped cause some of those deaths. But hearing the Althrani voices, he understood something he had never fully grasped before. They were just like his own people. Scared, brave, doing their duty, dying far from home. When the Althrani recording ended, Daniel activated the chip from the 7th Fleet. New voices filled the room. Human voices this time. Captain Sandra Mills of the destroyer Valiant, calling for support that would never come. Lieutenant Kevin Park of the cruiser Endurance, reporting that his engines were failing. Commander Amy Torres of the frigate Steadfast, ordering her crew to abandon ship. And then the voice of Admiral Patricia Cole. Daniel's mother spoke calmly and clearly, even as her ship died around her. She gave orders. She encouraged her crew. She told them she was proud of them. She told them their sacrifice would mean something. In the final transmission, recorded just minutes before the Resolute rammed the Althrani flagship, she spoke directly to her son. Daniel, she said, "I know you are listening. I know you will survive this. You have to survive. Someone must remember what we did here today. Someone must tell the truth. Take the insignia and carry it forward. Let the fleet live on through you. I love you, son. I am so proud of you. Now go. Live. That is my final order." The recording ended. Silence filled the memorial hall. Daniel stood with his head bowed. Tears streamed down his face. He did not try to hide them or wipe them away. He let them fall, Velith moved to stand beside him. Her own eyes were wet. She reached out and took his hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood together, two survivors, two former enemies, united by shared grief and shared understanding. Then Daniel raised his head and looked at the small gathering. He spoke in a voice rough with emotion, but steady with purpose. He said that for 15 years, he had been silent. He had believed that silence was what honor required. He had thought he was keeping faith with the dead by refusing to move forward. He thought hiding was the same as remembering. He touched the insignia on his chest, but he was wrong, he said. His mother did not order him to remember so he could suffer. She ordered him to remember so he could bear witness, so he could tell the truth of what happened and why it mattered. He had failed in that duty for too long. Vela squeezed his hand and spoke next. She said the Battle of Vareth Corridor was a tragedy born from fear and misunderstanding. Good people died on both sides because the Althrani and humanity did not know each other well enough to find another way. But from that tragedy came something extraordinary. Both species looked at what they had done to each other, and they chose peace instead of revenge. She said this peace had lasted 15 years. Today, she continued, new agreements had been signed that would strengthen that peace for generations to come. And it was all built on the foundation that Daniel's mother and her fleet had created with their sacrifice. Together, Daniel and Velith unveiled a new memorial plaque. It bore the names of every ship lost at Vareth Corridor, human and Althrani alike. At the top, written in both languages, were the words, "They held the line so others could find peace." The ceremony ended quietly. People wiped their eyes and embraced each other. Old enemies shook hands and shared stories. The wounds of the past began, slowly, to heal. In the weeks that followed, Daniel did not return to his silent work in Bay 7. Instead, at the request of both governments, he accepted a new role. He helped establish a joint engineering academy on Kara Station. Young humans and Althrani would learn together, work together, and build together. They would create ships and systems that neither species could make alone. They would become friends and partners instead of enemies. Daniel taught the first class himself. He showed them how to repair plasma conduits and crystalline matrices. He taught them to respect technology from other cultures. He shared the lessons his mother had taught him about duty, sacrifice, and never giving up. The insignia still rested in his pocket most days, but it no longer felt like a weight dragging him down. Now it felt like a compass, pointing him toward the future instead of trapping him in the past. On the first anniversary of the memorial's dedication, a young Althrani student approached him after class. She asked about the insignia she had seen him touching when he thought no one was watching. Daniel smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, the kind he had almost forgotten how to make. He told her it belonged to his mother. He said she gave it to him so he would remember. Then he asked if she would like to hear the story. The student nodded eagerly. Other students gathered around, human and Althrani alike, all of them curious and hopeful. Daniel Cole, the quiet mechanic who had hidden from his past for 15 years, took a deep breath and began to speak. He told them about the Seventh Fleet. He told them about his mother. He told them about courage and sacrifice and the true cost of war. He told them why peace was worth fighting for. And in the telling, he finally found his peace.